Hey guys, Ami here, and I am excited to paint with you today. I hope that you are ready to paint our little red truck. That is what this lesson is. So we will be working on this guy right here. Sorry about the glare. So you can use anything that you have at home. If you have paper, you're welcome to paint on paper. It doesn't always have to be on a canvas. I often will practice on paper or do my demos on paper so I don't end up with, after I'm practicing so many times or doing so many lessons, you don't always have to feel like everything has to be on a canvas. Today I'm going to be using a canvas board, which is just canvas on cardboard. You can get them at Michael's, you can get them through Amazon. I have them in our kits if you need some of those while my supplies last. Depending on who needs what and depending on what I have, especially during the sales. Watch Michael's generally has some great sales for you, but they do run out very quickly when they have a good sale. So watch for those, use your coupons, and have fun with it no matter what. If you don't have exactly what I'm using, use whatever you have. Even get a sketchbook. That's a great idea if you want to just keep all of your paintings in a sketchbook. I prefer the Canson, and I like the watercolor sketchbook. This is what it'll look like, but this says mixed media. You don't want mixed media for your painting. You want the one that says watercolor, because this paper is a little bit thinner. It's what I suggest for a lot of my art students, so it doesn't have the pill. So when they're doing drawing projects, they don't have that extra texture, but you'll want that for when you are doing any painting. So the mixed media would work, but the paper's going to curl just a little bit more, kind of like you can see my paper here. It curled up. So, it's easy if you lay books on it to get it to go flat again. It's not a big deal. But if you're wanting something a little sturdier, like this painting here I did on a watercolor paper, you can see how it didn't curl. It's a thicker, heavier stock of paper weight. So, all right, let's get started on our little red truck, and I hope that you enjoy this and have a very Merry Christmas. Here we go. All right, so what I'm going to have available for you in this particular lesson, if you don't want to freehand draw out your little red truck, I'm going to have a traceable, and you can enlarge it to whatever size you need and print it off, and this will allow you to transfer your image. I'm going to show you now how to transfer the print off. So I drew this one out, so it's already drawn, but yours will be like a printed photocopy, obviously. You're going to flip it over. I used a scrap piece of paper, so I apologize for the extra box template, but I wasn't wasting paper. So I'm going to look for the image on see-through. Sometimes it's easier if you have a white surface or a white piece of paper underneath. But I am going to use my number 2 a dark pencil. Just your standard pencil. Mechanicals will probably break if you try and do those, but you're just going to fill in all of those spaces. Wherever you see that line on underneath, you're going to fill it in with graphite. Obviously, this side does not have to be pretty. We are just creating our transfer. And sometimes I miss a spot and I'll just draw it in, kind of figure out where it should be. So you don't need a real sharp pencil, but you do have to have a decent tip on there. So sometimes I'll rotate my pencil, make sure I'm getting enough graphite onto the traceable. So again, I'm on the flip side. My photocopy would be on the other side of your print off. And you're just going to make sure this is all covered real dark. I've used this before. That's why there was already pencil marks on there. So I hope that didn't confuse you. But I like to draw once and then use that over and over. So now I'm going to take my canvas board that I showed you earlier. This one I think I got off of Amazon. in a pack. You can buy them like in a variety pack. So I'm going to make sure you guys can see this. I've got my paints up ahead, but you don't need those right now. So I've got my canvas board. I'm going to lay this about where I want. I notice my truck is not centered in my paper, so I'm not going to lay it right down or else it's going to look like it's driving right off. So if you want it real good and centered, kind of, eyeball it. Remember, you don't want it too high. You need room for the road below. So I'm going to put it, kind of towards the bottom, and I'm just going to lay it there. And I am going to just begin to trace. Now, it's a good idea to figure out a method so you don't miss any lines. I always miss at least one line, so we'll see how I do today. I need to sharpen my pencil. Hold on. All right, I grabbed a new pencil just because I couldn't find my pencil sharpener, at least my good one. So here we go. Make sure you don't want your tip too sharp or you could tear the paper, especially if you use this traceable a couple times. It will end up like wearing down over time, so you might want to print off a new one every so often, but I like to reuse it because it has the guide already on the back, so I know exactly where to scribble in. So I am just going to trace out my truck, and I'm going to make sure I either work from left to right, or I do my tree and then start and do the outline and then the details. Pick a way that you're going to trace it so you don't miss anything. So I think I'll start with my truck, and I'm just going to trace all of the lines and go around, making sure I get everything. And the graphite on the other side will transfer to your canvas. This is such an easy way to make sure that you have an accurate drawing if drawing makes you real nervous. This is not about learning to draw, which is a skill I have worked on because I didn't feel like drawing was one of my gifted talents. But it is a skill that I have honed and worked on and, really tried to just become more confident in. And the more I practice, the more confident I become. So, I think I missed some snow back here in my... So, and then just zigzag lines here for your wreath. That's going to end up a little bit more splotchy anyway once we paint it. A little door handle. And I think I've got my truck. You can lift it back and see. Oh, look, I forgot that bottom line. You may not be able to see this real well, but it is there. So if you are freehand drawing onto your canvas, now I will tell you one thing I forgot. You might want to first paint your background that we're going to do. And every time I paint, I always kind of go a different order. And again, the zigzags here don't really matter because we're not really going to paint them in perfect. It's going to end up being more freeform. Okay, now I think I have everything. This line could be a little bit better. So just flip it back. Now, because I did not paint my gray background first, and you don't have to paint your background gray if you want to do, a blue background or, tree and snows. So this is the inspiration. And like I said, I've done this painting multiple times. I've taught the class at least 10 times live in person. This time I didn't put snow on the tree, but there's snow on the truck. And here I did it. There is snow on the tree, and every time it's a little bit different. I'll hold it at an angle so you can see. My tree is always a little bit different. I even have different greens just because I blended differently. Here, flip it over. This was actually the back of one of my sketchbook pads of watercolor paper. When I tell you I will paint on anything, I'm not lying. This is literally a cardboard backing to a sketchbook pad. So, this was just a practice. Here I did blue. I gave a little angle to the sky. I gave, a little bit of, trying to get a good angle here, just a different angle to the bottom, a little bit more, tried to get a snowy effect. less snow on the truck, a blue window instead. So you can take any variation on this that you want to. I really want to just give you an inspiration and a starting point and, give you the techniques so that you can grow and make things how you want them to be, add more trees, whatever you want to do, you can make this yours. So, now because I drew out my transfer first because I forgot that I should probably paint my background first. So, if you watch this and then paint, you could paint your background first and then do your transfer on. But I'm just going to take my pencil, and I'm not worried about it being too dark because I'm going to paint over this. So depending on how thick you make your paint, and again, this is just going to kind of disappear, so I'm not worried if my tree branches look perfect. I'm just kind of trying to give myself a guide, and it doesn't always end up, exactly like the same one as before, and that's okay. So I'm going to get this in good and dark with my graphite. Now, because I'm painting my background in a black and white, a grayscale type background, I'm not worried about this graphite blending into my painting. If I were doing a beautiful blue or something, I would maybe opt for, I would definitely make sure I painted my background in first. But I would also probably choose either chalk or a watercolor pencil so that it would disappear, and I might choose something in the same color scheme or that would not, compromise. Because you don't want to gray out, your pastels or anything soft you're trying to go for. You don't want to darken them up. So just transfer over or trace over again all of those lines that you transferred down so you can see them. And you'll notice I am smudging a little as I drag my hand over, so you can always use a scrap piece of paper, pardon my reach, use a scrap piece of paper to put under your hand if you don't want to get that all over your hand. I always tell my younger students, because some of them hate the thought of having paint on them, and every time they get a little paint on their hands or glue, they want to run to the bathroom and wash it off without realizing we're not done creating yet, and you are going to get a little bit more on you. So I always kind of, just say as soon as they're like, I've got something on me, paint or chalk or look at my hands. Some of them are thrilled by having it, and others, if they have any type of sensory things going on, they just don't want anything on their hands, and that's totally understandable. Some people, just they want their hands clean. But I always tell my students, or even at parties, as soon as you get paint on you, or your hands become a little messy, you are now officially an artist. So my students know, I also teach music at the school, and my students, I'll be teaching a music class last year or the years before. I'm not going to worry about that line because it'll be black. And, I'd come into class with paint all over my hands, or, a smudge on my face. And new kids that are brand new to the school, they might ask, Mrs. Kelp, why do you have, blue all over your hands? And the other kids are like, because she's the art teacher. So they know that I'm generally going to have something all over my hands. I actually have black on my hands from putting it out, and I noticed I had it on my nail. I'm like, I need to clean that part off because sometimes it just, unless it's super colorful, I'm like, I don't want to look completely shabby. Okay, so we've got our tracing done. Again, we need to paint out our gray background, and so that's where I'm going to begin. And I want to prime my canvas. If you're working on paper, your paper is going to absorb a lot more of the moisture faster because it's more porous, but generally our canvases have an initial priming on them, unless you're buying them raw without the gesso, and then you need to put some sort of initial gesso primer down, but most, unless you're buying it that way, which Michael's, they all come prepped and ready to go. But paint sticks better to paint. So I always try and get one layer down with just my white. So today for our painting, you're going to need a wide paintbrush to paint your background. I always suggest, depending on the size of your painting, should depend on the size of your brush. If you're working with a really small canvas, you could do this on a 4x5, you could do it on a 5x7, you can do it on whatever size you want. But if you're working with a small canvas, this kind of brush might be a bit overkill, so you could go with something smaller. All right, so we have the wide flat brush. You'll also need something to paint in. So choose a brush that's a good size. So you'll want a round brush, but this one, if I were to choose this, it's going to be really hard, to do some of my detailed areas. On this particular painting, it's not a big deal because I'm going to paint the whole thing red and see my lines a little bit underneath. But if I were trying to, get real detailed in here, when I do start shading, I'm going to want something a little smaller. So this is going to be a better selection for size. So that's where size is going to be important in your paintbrush selection. But a round brush is going to help you go around these curves real easily and be a good fit there. And the last brush you'll need is a detail brush. So this one is a little bit finer and it allows for getting in little intricate details, when we go to outline and, just those small things, painting your signature, etc. So, and I will show you how to use each of those within the video. All right, so the colors you're going to need for this video or for this painting are white, a green, red, and black. Now, you can get real specific with the kind of reds and everything, but if you have this basic palette, you're going to be good. I have a little bit of a metallic green that I have in my stash, a silver, and this is a metallic red, which it has a real pink. It looks orange in the video, but it actually looks a little more pink, but metallics tend to be a little bit more translucent, so I'm going to paint everything solid, and then I might add my metallics for an extra pop and just a little bit of added pizzazz. So I'm going to start by, make sure you also have your water and something to dry off your paintbrush and clean it off as you go along. So I'm just going to get my brush wet. I don't want it, sopping wet when I dip it in, but this will help avoid your brush being too dry, and it's going to allow your paint to flow. I'm going to get all my extra water off of the ferrule of my brush. So I'm just going to start by dipping in, and you notice I got some water on my canvas, and that's fine. Even sometimes getting your canvas a little wet, it can help spread around the paint. You'll notice my graphite there smeared, and that's okay. I'm not going to dip smack into the center of my paint. Even though I'm just starting off, I'm going to get in the practice of going to the side. If you're in the habit of going to the side, you won't end up when you're like color mixing, ending up with, green or red or black in the middle of your white paint. So always take your paint from the side or edge, whether you're working with a palette, like on a paper plate, or, extra styrofoam lid, whatever you got. I will, again, use anything I've got just to get the paint down. You might want to protect your table surface area. I'm just getting a little layer of white. I'm going right over this truck because, again, paint adheres better to paint. So I want to paint my entire surface area, and I'm just going to start with the white, and I'll go back and add the black. So don't be afraid to move your canvas. If this motion is awkward and you prefer up and down, or if you like an angle, move your canvas however it's comfortable for you. The water is going to help your brush flow, but if you have too much, it's going to compromise the integrity of your paint. So be careful not having too much water, but you do want water to allow it to flow. If you cover up your truck, you've probably got not enough water. Notice how thick that is. It's not bad. I'll eventually only see the shadow outline, but I'm just dipping in, going, adding that. I'm going to work kind of quickly because while my white is still wet, I want to be able to add in the black. When I dip down on my canvas, I am starting in a blank area as opposed to where my truck is, just because I don't want a big glob of white here. I don't need the white there, but over here. So then I just kind of glide it over just so I have the paint everywhere. So I don't want too much white over here. So my focus area is the outside. So I've got everything kind of primed. Looks like I missed a little spot down here. You can kind of tell when it's just a little bit shiny, because then, that's where it's wet. So, all right, now black is going to go a long way. I'm going to get a little bit more white on my brush. Just dip it in like I did before. And with the corner of my brush, I'm just going to take it in and just barely touch it. Like there's barely any paint on this brush for black. That's probably even, I could even wipe it off. Now, I'm going to kind of just start to go side to side. Now, I can go with the width of my brush, or I can go with the edge of my brush. So if you paint this way, you're going to get a wide line. If you paint this way, you're going to get the thin, narrow line. So practice with it, see what you like. I did it with the black side first, and you notice that goes real black. If I switch it, the black goes to a different spot. I'm just going to keep going over, blending that black in. I'm going to rotate my brush because I've got that black in different spots. Again, going right over my truck and tree. And if you're working on a easel at home, your canvas may not move around. I prefer to paint flat, so I end up having to hold my canvas a little bit more. Again, more white and a touch of black. Notice I got my white in there, so I need to be careful in the future where I go. So I'm not going to go smack in the middle of my truck. I'm going to gray out this side over here a little bit. So, and I'm just using this motion with my brush. I could do this, but then I would end up with all my white in one area and all my black in another area. I'll show you what happens like that. So I want my white, because I've got a glob of white right here, so I'm going to scoop that back up on my brush. When I do it, I want my white to kind of be with my black. So, and then I rotate it once I get that initial part of the application down. Again, going right over my truck. I can still see my lines, so I still have my guide underneath because I'm not painting too heavy of paint. Even though this is a heavy body white, it's good. So again, just a dot of black, ever so small. And then I've got my white. I'm going to go this way with it and just then rotate my brush. Now, if you find, oh, that's way too dark, just go grab some more white, again at the side, so you're not putting any of that black that might still be on your brush, and just smooth it, blend it out. I'm not too worried about getting the gray all the way into the truck, just because, we're going to paint that later. It will add texture underneath and help gray out the red. So if you want it real shadowy under your truck, you might want to have more gray down there. But if you want it, a little bit more white, then add a little bit more white and just keep blending. I'm still using the narrow edge of my brush to go side, back and forth, not wide. But you experiment and see what you prefer. Now I've got a lot of paint in this brush right now. I'm going to just dip it in my water a little bit, and it's going to help move a little bit of my paint around. So I don't want it soaking wet, but that'll wake up the paint that's on my brush. I'm going to get the excess out, but it wakes up the paint on my brush, and it's going to help move the paint on my canvas around just a little bit without having to continue to layer the paint on there. And I'm going to go at an angle for a second, just so I'm not touching the top of my canvas as I'm all right. So once you're happy with what it looks like, remember we're going to add, some snow at the bottom. So if you feel like it's, too gray, you can either continue to white it out, or you can imagine, okay, this is under the truck, so it's just shadows. It's, it's natural for the bottom. If it's the road, it's a murky day. If you want it a little bit brighter of a day, brighten it up. So you decide what you want it to look like, play with a little bit, and then you're going to let this dry. If you're in a hurry or you want to speed things up, feel free to grab out a hair blow dryer and to speed up the process. So I'm just going to clean my brush while I wait for this to dry, and then we will continue. So feel free to pause and wash your own brush as well. Make sure when you're washing your brush that, see how the white comes out? So you know the brush isn't clean even though it looks clean. So you need to make sure that you wash it thoroughly, because if you leave any paint in here, it's going to stiffen your bristles. It could end up in the ferrule of your brush, and they'll end up spreading out over time, and you lose the integrity of your brush. So I always kind of have a double dip. So I have, one jar of, I try and keep really clean water. So when I'm adding water, it's real fresh and it's not murky. I have one where I kind of dip and then, wipe. And then I'll often, if I'm working for a while, I'll have one where I just kind of, as long as I'm going to wash these at the very end with soap and water. You can do it like as you're waiting for something to dry. But often I'll just have a jar where I just kind of put the brush in with just, a little bit of water at the bottom, just so it doesn't dry out. And then at the end, I will go and wash all my brushes really good with a soap and water. So feel free to wash your brush, put it on hold. I can tell when my canvas is dry based on the little bit of shine. I can see this shine right here. So I know that part's still wet. And there's a little bit of shine at the top. If it's not in my truck and I'm in a rush, sometimes, I'll hair blow dry it. Or I might move on if the wet spot's over here and I know my truck itself is dry. I don't suggest you do this number to feel, because if you do have any type of wetness, especially when you start to have more of your details, if you're rubbing to see if it's wet and it is, you could smear your green and your red together, or your black into your red where you don't want it. So that's not a real good way. I often will look for the shine. Now, if you have a high gloss paint, it's going to be a little tricky to tell. So sometimes I will do the tacky method where I just touch and see, but again, don't smear. So, all right, pause while you wash and wait for it to dry. Rewind if you need to do anything over again, and we will continue. Okay, so my painting is dry for my first layer. Now I have put the caps on my containers of white and black because I'm not going to be using those for a good hot minute. If you need paints, I can make them available to you for the kits. And I can make canvases available to you. So they will come in little condiment cup containers like this. I had done this for my high school classes and my elementary. With COVID, I wanted to make sure everybody had, their own little dispenser, and this was a great way. So I was like, oh, this would be perfect for my paint parties, whether virtual or if I do them in person, I'll be able to put them in the condiment cup so everybody has what they need right at the beginning. And we don't have any worry of, cross-contamination or exposure. So I've got my red paint out right now because that's the one I'm going to need. I'm going to cap off my green too because I'll do my tree after my red truck. So I'm going to get out my round brush now. Again, try and make sure your brush fits the size of your canvas and that it is a good size, not too big, not too small, because if it's too small, it'll take all day long to paint. My brush is dry, so I'm going to get it wet. I'm going to wipe it off so it's not too soggy wet. And I can tell the last time I used this brush, I must have been in blue watercolor or something because there was blue on the edge. So I did not wash my brush well, you guys. Whoops. Or one of my kids might have borrowed it. I don't know. There's never any telling. I couldn't find my pencil sharpener, and you can guess as to why. So if you notice this brush right here, I don't know if it's going to focus, but the bristles are not creating that good smooth tip. That can happen. This is a cheaper brush, but the unicorn's so cute. So that can happen when you get paint in the ferrule. So if you store your brushes up right side up when they're drying, all the liquid and the extra paint is going to soak into the barrel here. And you don't want that because then it's going to cause the bristles to spread out. So make sure when you're drying, you lie them flat. So I'm going to add a little more water because while I was talking, I dried it off. So again, I'm going to go to the side, even though I'm not mixing anything right now. I've got my red, and I'm just going to start to paint out within the outline of my truck. I'm not worried if I don't go over all those lines perfectly. I can still see my snow underneath, but it's a real abstract snow, so if you can't see it, that's okay too. I'm just getting a good base layer underneath so that I will have that good red. Now red is a little bit more translucent, generally speaking. There's not a lot of pigment in the reds. And so it does often require a couple layers. Typically, if you were going to paint your walls red, like at home, you would want to prime them gray first. So a gray undertone would help give the red that layer that it needs. So again, but we're going to have a couple coats on this. I just want to get the first down. I am staying within the lines, even though it's all going to end up red. I'm trying to stay in the lines just so the directionality, whenever I paint on a curve, I try and make sure my curves stay, curved. And that'll help with the form of my truck when I go to create angles. Even where I'm putting the white, I'm going to paint it red for now. I'm just getting in these areas. And on my screen, the red, of course, looks a little bit different, so it might show up a little different for everybody color-wise, but I have a good cherry red. You can pick any kind of red that you want. You could paint your truck teal. You could paint it green. Nobody says it has to be red. It's just the little red truck, and then it can be your little teal truck or just a little vintage truck, little Christmas tree truck. You could obviously skip the Christmas tree if you wanted to fill the back of it with boxes, Christmas gifts. You could, paint it full of flowers. If you wanted to do a version of this for the spring, doesn't have to be, only used for winter. I lost my line down there, so I'm going to imagine where it's at. I don't want to go below the wheel well. I think that's what that's called. So just spreading it all around. I'm even going to go where that green is And just paint right over the wreath. I'm going to be able to see that, but again, the layers of paint are just going to add dimension, and then that way if there's any of my green wreath that isn't completely solid, I'll see the red of the truck behind it and not the white of background canvas. So I'm not putting too much paint on my brush. I don't want to get it too gloppy. I don't need paint up to here because only what's on the tip of my brush is going to end up on my canvas. And if I find that I'm having to push down really hard for more than technique, and I'm trying to get the paint out, you probably need more paint. So make sure you have paint on your brush. I always tell my kindergarten, first grade, my elementary students basically, because I have to remind the older ones, that our paintbrushes are ballerinas. So it's going to dance on its toes and not scoot on its booty. So if you are pushing so hard that your paintbrush is scooting on its booty and fraying all out, then you probably need more paint. And it's not like a crayon where we need to push hard. We are just simply moving the paint along the canvas. That is our goal. If I go outside my lines a little bit, that's okay. Because I'm going to go back with black later and fill in lines, and obviously I'm going to put a wheel in there that's going to be black. And so I'm just trying to keep that curve. So whenever I have a curved edge, I try and keep that curve going. Now this right here, it might be hard at this angle. So I'm actually going to rotate my truck. So if you find it's easier to paint on a different angle, don't feel like you have to keep it, at that one specific spot. Even if you're on an easel, move your canvas around, flip it. I have some people at the paint parties where they will, hold the canvas in their lap because they just want it closer or they need to see better. Do what works for you. So we're just simply filling in the lines. It's like an adult coloring book with a paintbrush. And I'm just going carefully. So I've got my first layer. I'm trying to make sure everything is completed. And I do want this first layer to dry mostly. So when I go back and shade, I'm not pulling paint. If you have your paint and you go and it's kind of tacky, you're going to end up pulling more paint off of your canvas than you put onto your canvas. So be careful of that. Again, before I wash my brush in the water, I'm going to get the excess paint off of it so I don't end up with super dirty water, because that just, I don't know, it irks me. You can do whatever you want, but that's just my little tip, is make sure that you kind of clean your brush. I'll use a cup to make sure I'm getting all the excess off, or I'll just dip it into my water. I have multiple waters over here so I don't end up with dirty water. So, but if you just dip it in and don't swirl it and then clean it off on your brush, you're going to get a lot more off. And then when you go to put it in here, your water only ends up pink instead of super red or super dirty and cloudy and contaminating. So you will see, some of that other color. So I'm going to use this brush again. I think I have it clean enough where I don't need to soak it in water because I don't want it to fill with water too much. So while I wait for my red to dry, I'm going to just kind of go to my black wheels. So I'll pull the paint off of that one. And I'm just going to go fill in this. Now you can either leave the middle wheel well exposed if you want and then go paint that in later, or you can just cover it up if you're confident with a circle. You can always draw a circle back in there with chalk. Use something to trace it. I'm sure we all have something circular at home. And a little black does go a long way. So I'm just getting that first layer. And again, if you find one angle is hard to paint, flip it around so you can get a better. It's easier for me to go this way around these curves than to try and maneuver it, this way. That's a little tricky for me. So I just rotate my canvas so that I can get in there and make sure I've got everything. So again, I'm just going to rotate it a little bit, make sure I'm comfortable. Make sure you got enough paint on your brush, but not too much. I know that's a fine line. So this is the second video I have done for our virtual classes. Obviously, I am happy to, once it's safe or in a safe setting, to teach in-person classes, because I love being in the classroom. But I know there's so many risks right now, and we want to make sure everybody's safe, but art therapy is something we could probably all use. So I figured, you know what? I need to keep painting. Some of you have asked me to keep painting, so this is how we're going to accomplish that. Now, I'm noticing, I think that wheel well is a little high, so I can either raise this one to kind of compensate, or I could bring the red down, but I think it's going to be easier to thin this one out a little bit than to bring that one down. So if you ever come across anything like that, feel free to just, fix it, or don't worry about it. Some people are not going to even notice that. So I think that helped a little bit. And I can use snow to hide some of those other things where I'm like, it might have brought that out a little too much, but it's fine. I'll just put some snow down there and we'll cover that up. It'll be good. So my first painting online class, I'll paint my window black. My first class that is available is the Winter Gnome. So you can also find that one. It is $15 for the class, and you have access to it, as many times as you want. You have the ability to stop, start, rewind, play again and again. And when you pay for that $15 class, I encourage you within your immediate family, your spouse, your kids, do it as a family. I want you to use that within your entire household. If you are going to invite friends, I do have a friend package where you can purchase the video, and as a hostess, invite your friends over, and it's $10 per guest. So if you're going to have 10 friends over or 3 friends over, everybody would pay $10 for the class. You get to keep the rights to the video in your Google Classroom account. You will be added to the lesson as the hostess for inviting them, and you will have rights to the video beyond. They wouldn't get to keep it, but most people are only going to do it once or twice, and they would have the lesson in their mind, but you as the hostess would have the benefit of having the class in your Google Classroom if you were to join the classroom. I can email things out as well. If you don't have Google, that's fine. I can send you an email link to a private video. So I've finished my wheels. I've got my truck done. Now I'm going to move on to the shading we're going to give some texture to our truck. We're going to darken it up and give it some good, depth and really make it look vintage, give it some character. So the first thing, I'm not going to rinse my brush. So we're going to leave that little bit of black on there because it's going to help darken up our red. And I'm just going to start all over, and you're going to notice that black is going to come through. And now if you ever have a point where there's too much black, just add a little more red. But again, stay within your lines so that, if you're painting in that motion that the wheel well sits on, it's going to give it that form that you're looking for. Now at some point we might need to add a little bit more black, and we can do that. But remember, it's just a dot. We just want a dot. This is to kind of give us just some dimension in the truck and again, character. I'm going to come back and lighten that up, but I'm going to go to this wheel well first. And I'm noticing it's coming out a little bit more red now. Lighten that one up. So in December, I do have some plans for a couple gift type events where, I want to give back. I love painting with you guys. I love being able to give and to share what I love doing with everybody. I'm going to pull out that black. So watch for those on my Facebook page or in the Google Classroom announcement. I'm going to put it on the lid of my brush. So I want to be able to wipe it all off. I don't want too much. So I'll come back to this. And that way I'll have the black, but I won't have too much. You don't want too much. Black goes a long way to shade. So if you want to get involved in like contests or, just the drawings that I hope to have, feel free to watch the page, join it if you haven't already. Oop, there goes that black. That's okay, we can just lighten it up. I also am going to have, I haven't decided exactly what day. My husband is working in Grand Rapids right now. He recently got a promotion in October, so he's gone through the week and home on the weekends. He comes home Friday night and then he leaves Sunday afternoon back to Grand Rapids. So I'm kind of maybe thinking about either a Sunday night tutorial class where I would do a mini live video that'll be free to anybody on my page, or you can invite friends, to kind of give you a feel for how to use brushes, different tips and tricks. I'll show people how to do that tracing again and how to find other images. Like if you have something you want to paint and you don't know how to draw it out, but you want to trace it, the easiest way to go about doing something like that. So I want to help you guys grow, and then also it'll give some people a feel for a mini version of how these paint classes will go, so that if they're wondering, is that something I really want to do, they can get ideas to whether they like me or not, and if they feel like it would be something they'd be interested in. So, and plus it would give me a chance to interact with you guys if I'm gonna try and I think do it like a Zoom class, so anybody with the link can join in, and then you can ask me questions, and I can, give you feedback and, just have a chance to paint together, because we don't get that right now and I miss it. So I've just moved on to the body of the truck and still have a little bit of black on my brush. Every so often, I find it's in one spot more than others, so this is where I am kind of pushing a little bit more because I know it's on the inside. This is another time I could wake up my paint by adding a little water to my brush, but and this will be a good spot to, mention that, those kind of tips, the extra freebie classes will be just a good place to practice. I'll probably use my sketchbook, and I'm going to wake up this black with a little water. I'll use my sketchbook and really just, paint some fun stuff, maybe some abstract, talk about balance, and just whatever you guys are interested in. I don't know that we'll do full-blown paintings. I might do one or two here and there, smaller versions of something, just to give you guys a little taste of everything, to be able to hang out. So we've gotten a darker layer on our truck, and depending on how dark you want your truck or how light you want it, you can always go back over it with another layer. Imagine, closer to the floorboards, it might be darker. Towards the top, it might be lighter. So right now, I'm just, again, getting that other layer. So painting, especially with acrylics, is all about layers, which I love, because if I make a mistake, I don't have to live with it. I can go back and fix it and know that, I'm not stuck with that. Whoops. So I'm going to let this dry because it's kind of pulling a little bit. And it's, it's real rough right now. So I'm going to go back in and give it some red highlights. But again, you can tell it's wet because it's shiny. So you can pause, and I'm going to just dampen my brush. I don't need to wash it because I still want that darkness in there, but I don't want to leave it just dry or like waiting, because then it'll dry up in there and become goopy and start to spread. You do want to, wash out the brush every so often. So if it's starting to spread or you're not getting a good tip, then be sure to wash it. All right, well, during our pause, I went ahead and cleaned my brush because my red's taken a little bit of time to dry, and I figure, you know what, I can paint my tree. So again, I never have like a straight way I do this, so my brush is still a little bit wet, so I'm just going to go in and paint and just give myself little, I'm brushy strokes, not pushing too hard, just trying to get the green down. I'm trying to keep my edges a little bit wispy because we want the texture of the tree. So trying to make sure that I don't lose that effect. Wondering if tilting it up a little might help you guys. I can hold it up. So that might, so just have the texture. So just, real light strokes with your brush. Don't be afraid to try it on a different type of paper. Now, here you can either choose to have it look like the tree is on the other side of the truck if you want this smooth, or you can look like the tree is just kind of taken over and the bristles are coming up all over this truck. So however it happens, it's perfectly fine. If your tree is ginormous, it might be just taken over all areas of the truck. So just these light little wisps, little half circle kind of C motions, but not a full C, but just little wispy motions to get the tail like that. And that'll give you a good wispy tree edge if that's what you're looking for. If you want, that real straight, rugged look, you might want to get in there with your detail brush and, do that, but I want just a little bit more natural of a look, and I find it's easier to be whimsical and fluffy with it than to try and get in with all those details. I get frustrated if, it just takes too much time. I want to feel a little bit more free when I paint. So just keeping with that same curve all the way throughout, little strokes, just to try and keep the texture. Some of my green is showing up a little lighter, some is darker, and that's okay. That's gonna help give our tree, oh, look at that. I just put a thumbprint. Don't do that, guys. I'll fix it later. It's gonna help give some value and depth in your trees, so it'll look like some are deeper and some are right on the out. So you want that. I'm gonna have my bristles go right over the edge. I might give myself a line just to make sure it's good and solid. And then I'm gonna go back and add that texture that I wanna make sure I have. I'm not quite done with my truck, so we've got a couple layers going on here. So there, I've got the first layer of my tree, and we've got lots of value, so that's a good thing. Now, for my second layer of the tree, if you've got just the white, you could go in and just touch of white. We're not looking to do the snow just yet, but again, and don't do what I just did and dip it in the middle like I tell you not to. On the edge, just lighten up. You can wait till this dries, or you can do it a little sooner. I'm not doing a ton of it, but just a touch of white. And if you grab too much, you can just wipe it off on the side and save it for your next dip in. And this will just give our tree a little bit more of that realistic, fluffy value that we're hoping for. I'm not doing every single stroke. I'm not covering all of the tree, but I am working from top to bottom. And you could work from bottom to top if you want your bristles to layer well. You can start at the bottom, and that way when you paint it, you're going to have the overlapping will work up. When I went down, it wasn't that big of a deal, but when you go up, you might want to make sure that you have that. Now notice some of that is darker, and I'm just working it into the paint, so not a real big deal. If you don't want your tree quite so white, this is one way you could add snow without having to go back and just give it kind of that flocked look. Just real soft, feathery. And if it ends up a little too white for you, go back with a little more of the green, but I kind of like the flocked look. I'm going to try not to put more thumbprints on my picture. So, there's really no right or wrong way to do this. Art is really all about experimentation and just, what happens when I do this? So I'm just going to keep working up on my tree. Every so often I add a little more green. If I need more white, I'll throw that in there. I'm not worried about those real white spots because they'll just end up looking snowier later. I just want a couple different values of my green so my tree has some depth and dimension and doesn't just look like a flat Christmas tree. Grabbed a little white down here just so I don't have to keep dipping in my white. the different values are going to help. Put that there. So if you're working with a paper plate, obviously for your palette of paint, you know, you can mix on your paper plate. If you have a palette that you wash every time, you know, that's fine too. I tend to just go with a paper plate, but I figured if I was going to do the condiment cups, I would show you what you would be getting for your paints if you needed to get your supplies from me. Kind of missed a spot there. Not a big deal. So we're just getting lots of texture in our tree. Green overlapping white and different shades. And I kind of like just the added little fluffs of white as opposed to, you know, I'll show you my other. This is a little bit easier than some of the ways I've done it. So every time I paint something, it's different. So if your painting does not come out like mine, don't fret. It's your painting. It should look like your painting, not like mine. We all have different ways that we use our brush and just different styles, and that's okay. I'm going to try and do that last little white bits to give my snow. So I'm just basically stippling or dabbing at this point. I don't want to paint too much. I want it to look like, you know, the snow is kind of clumped right on the branches in some areas. Not everywhere, but, you know, maybe just in some spots. We've just got the snow clumping down. Put the lid on so I can use that again later. I didn't add any green metallic, so you know, I'm going to do that before I get too involved in this white and see what happens with this. I'm just curious. So, oh, that's pretty. Yep, I like that. I have to remember. So let's throw some down here. Doesn't have to be everywhere. Just another shade of green. I'll have to go back and put in some of those whites. Not looking to hide all the darkness, but just to add another layer of dimension into my tree. Just a little bit more shiny magic, and this metallic paint goes a long way. So when you're pouring out paint, if you're purchasing your own, you know, I always suggest, you know, just small dime size amounts are probably more than sufficient. You can always add more. You don't have to start off with, you know, a full glob of paint, especially like black. Unless you're doing large spots, it's gonna really stretch a long way if you're just using it for shading. Throw a little white on there with my green. Make sure you shake up those metallics real well, because when I open mine, they tend to have a lot of separation. So be sure to get in there and separate them out. I'm going to keep my strokes curving. I really like that pretty green that's on the metallic. But that base layer of dark green is what really supports it. If I hadn't done that, it would probably be too light against the gray. So it's important to get those important base layers down, and don't skip those steps because they are important. And that white really just helps make it top because you can see where the white underneath, you know, if I had done the whole tree and just the metallic, I'd have more of a seafoam green tree. Just muddied up my paint with the white. So just keep playing with it. And if you get one layer down and you hate it, remember acrylic, let it dry and go over it. Again, I'm gonna give you enough paint to definitely do the size. Like if you purchase the $15 canvas 16 by 20 canvas kit from me and paint, you'll have enough paint to do your canvas and maybe one other small one, depending on how much you use. Some people are more heavy-handed and they use a lot more paint. Some people, just they're able to spread it a little farther. So it's going to depend on how heavy your hand is, how many layers you do, but you should be able to get. Now my tree's getting a little light. I need to add some more of that dark. Don't be afraid to go back in and darken it up a little bit if you're getting too light. Because now, dip in my dark, it's kind of taken on a metallic into the green, which is kind of fun. So again, you can get a kit from me for $15 with a 16 by 20 canvas and the 4 paints that you will need. If you want the additional metallic paints while I have them, those will be an additional $1 each for the red and green, so another $2 should be $17 for the 4 standard colors, your 2 metallics to add the shimmery highlights if you want to go that route. Otherwise, you are welcome to use supplies you have at home. Get familiar with your own brushes. I have brushes available for $1 each. In December, I might be doing some, bonus giveaways. I have a ton of brushes from my paint parties, and right now they're just sitting there. So I was like, you know what? I could have little contests or, little prizes, and I can send those brushes out with some people, who maybe buy kits or sign up for so many classes. They're not doing me any good sitting here, and if I can send them home with you and have you guys creating at home, then so be it. I can always buy more later and share the love now. But if you want brand new brushes, then I do have those available for purchase as well. But I think I might be gifting some of my paint party brushes. Obviously, they would be in a condition where you could paint with them. If I wouldn't use them at my party, then I wouldn't send them out to you. So again, I could do this all day long on this tree and just put in so many layers, but you'll notice, like, I feel like there's a bald spot here. So I'm gonna kind of give it a little bit of lightness underneath. I think it's just an awkward spot because I'm not sure if I should swing to the left or right. So again, sometimes you just play with it. In nature, we're not gonna find anything, just so or perfect. God has created so many wonky trees that are so full of character. So don't feel like if your tree doesn't look perfect, it's fine. Like, really. And just keep going at it. You can paint this over and over. I'm pulling some more of that metallic with my dark green. Can't really see all my paints over there, can you? So sometimes it's just about experimenting. Seeing how can I get that dimension layer look. And my tree might get lighter as it gets towards the top because there's less depth to it, but I don't want it completely different. So I do need to have some of those dark undertones still still in there, but more towards the middle. Maybe just spread that white out a little bit. And if you aren't real happy with your green, throw snow on it. You can just dab some snow on. But I would wait till it dries, because otherwise you'll end up with more shading. Alright, so I think I'm pretty happy with the fluff of my tree. I could do this all day long, literally, and never stop. So you have the ability to stop and start and fast forward. So if you're like, I have moved on from my tree, fast forward. Get yourself to the next step where you are ready to go. So you don't have to just sit here and watch me paint. So, all right, I've got my tree nice and fluffy, lots of dimension. It's all about the layers and the shades. So give yourself different values by tinting your green with a white. If you have a light green and you want to shade it, a touch of the black in your green, or if you have the dark green and you want to brighten it up, again, the metallic is a great option. So those are some of the options that I have. I'm just going to clean off my brush. Oh, just stuck my finger in the green glob of paint on my paper towel. So when I get into my white and black, I'm going to try and fix that. There's sometimes, if you get it, you can maybe fix it. But I've taken off a little bit of the white, but it took out at least my thumbprint. So maybe when I go back over it, it'll look a little more natural, hopefully. But I do that all the time. I had surgery on my hand right here, and so I don't have a lot of grip. So sometimes after my hand gets a little fatigued, I can't tell you how many times I've dropped my paintbrush in the middle of my painting, and I've had to fix something or add a bird or, happy little tree, as Bob Ross would say. All right, I'm going to pull back out this black in case I need it, but I am done with my greens for now, so I'm going to cap those up. I'm going to pull out that red, and once I'm to that point, use it for some sparkly highlights on my tree, because I'm feeling like this is going to be, or not my tree, I'm sorry, my truck. Make it a little bit more fancy. I could do the wheel wells now, but I'm going to get into my trucks. That way I don't want to dip my hand into any of that. I'll probably do that once I start doing the highlights and the snow is when I will do my wheels. And you can do those white, or you can gray them out if you choose. So now I want to add some brightness back into the truck. It's pretty dark. But I want to get it, where we have some brightness as well. So you may have done that by not adding too much dark in the first place. But if you did, you can just go back in and add some more red to brighten up, a few of those areas. And just keep, imagine, where do you want it brighter? Where's the truck going to be cleaner? Where's it going to be dirty? Feel free to spread that around because you'll still be able to see that darkness through. I just want to give a few highlights. Make sure, I don't want my truck to look too dingy. And I am going to keep my highlights. So this is my door here, so the directionality would all be the same on my door. But if I'm moving down to a wheel well, I'm going to make sure that the curve and the highlight is going in the direction of the wheel well. Same with like up here. If I wanted to brighten that up, I'm going to stay with the curve of the truck. That'll help give us some form. And if you don't need to do this step, then you're good just to keep going on. I think I want that a little bit brighter. I don't want to look like I didn't take care of my truck at all. I feel like I lost. Okay. So I've got that. Let's see what happens with a little bit of this red. Now that really is, it is a little bit pink. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm going to go into my red. And that helped tone it out. But I am losing a lot of that darkness, but I really kind of like it. So if you don't have the metallic and you want to keep it dingy, you can. If you add, like my water's a little bit dirty right now, so I'm just adding a little water to my brush, and that'll help thin out that metallic I had going on. So with my dirty water, I'm going to kind of put together just a glaze so I don't lose too much of the rustic look, but it'll have a little bit of shimmer to it. And a little pink truck would be cute though. I would not be opposed to that. So I just want to make sure I go, since it is a different kind of color altogether, I'm going to kind of just lightly go over the whole truck and make sure I have unity in my color. Kind of went up there, but so this one has a little bit different of a hue than my previous trucks, but that's okay because once you have so many trucks, you don't need them all looking the same, right? And this pinky color is kind of fun. I like it. So right now I'm just trying to add that shimmer and make sure everything kind of has the same color. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. So that's why when something doesn't quite go exactly, unless it were like a commission piece and they asked me for a red truck, if I ended up painting it pink and shimmery, they probably would not be too happy. But if I am painting just because I want to paint, then I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to grab a little more of this just to wake it up. So the color's a little different than our original plan, but if you have the red at home and that was your plan and that was your desire, then you're good to go because you do not add the metallic. And if you know now, because you watched me, that it's going to become more pink and that's not what you want, don't do it. Or you can just add it to your red in the beginning on your second coat, and it'll probably be a little bit more red if you mix the two together. So there are ways to figure things out. So there is my non-traditional little red truck with a pink shimmer, so it almost has like a purple undertone. I kind of like it. I do. All right, so there you can see that shine. It's fun. So I am going to be done with this. I could add some more. I lost some of that black, so I might, just for the sake of giving a little bit more texture back into it since we lost some of that. I'm going to brush some of that texture back in because I don't want to lose all of it. So again, around the curves, imagine where is it going to be dirty. So you would do this as well if you have your red truck and you weren't happy with that. You know, just kind of highlight or shade out. You know, give it. I think that one ended up a little too much in the black, so go back and just soften it up a little bit. And some of that's going to be covered up by snow, but the curves, it just really gives form into the wheel well. And you know, you imagine that there's curves in your truck, so you want to show those curves. Now that I've got that shimmer on there, it's kind of hard to see. I apologize. All right, so next, what we have left are, we need wheel wells. We're going to need some detail lines to really make everything pop on our truck. We are going to need our snow on the ground and on the truck, and our wreath. So those are the things that we have left. My detail brush is what I'm going to do my detail lines, and there's a couple different ways you can do snow. Let me show you what I've done. I've done little stipples of snow. In the drawing, it actually, you know, has the curve line. If you want to do something as simple as that, you can. I just put on like the dusting effect for this particular one. You know, imagined it would be up on the tires and on the what is this? Hitch? I don't know. This one I just kind of used, let's not make it upside down for you. This one I just used lines, you know, just little light dusting. Again, you know, however you do it is fine. I just added some circular lines in the wheels to make it look like it was moving. Here, I got a little more concentrated with like the piles of where the snow was. You can see that there's gray in here, which I'm going to show you how to do to really give it that dimension. So those are some of the ways that you can do it, or you can go back to your original concept and just do something simple where you just have the wiggly snow line right on your truck, and that's fine too. Whatever works for you. So I'm going to start with putting on my black detail lines, because that needs to happen before our snow, because the snow will sit on top of that. So I'm going to get my brush wet. Now whenever I do detail lines, I want a good amount of water because I want this black to be fluid. I don't want it to be too thick and gloopy. So I get a decent amount of water. I'm going to avoid my white, and then I take my detail brush, it's pretty fine, and I twist it to kind of twist a lot of that paint off. And you do want to make sure this is pretty dry. I think I should be okay. So I'm going to go and just start and put in my detail lines. I don't want to start on this end because then by the time, if I'm right-handed, by the time I get over here, this is all wet. So I do try working left to right. Yes. So I'm just going to very carefully go in and put in my lines. Now I'm going to show you, if you, pardon my reach, this brush is, if you have it really soft or really thin, you can create a thin line. But if you push, you're going to get a thicker line. So be sure that you are not, pushing too hard, or you're not going to get a detail line. If you twist it, it's going to help you to get that line back. Adding a little water, you can see the more water I have, the more translucent my line. And this it won't have as good of an integrity in the quality of the paint, and it could flake over time. So be careful having too much water in your acrylic so it doesn't flake in your composition, and keep your lines thin. So there's all different widths of detail brushes. Some of them are super teeny tiny. And you could also use an acrylic pen. I have something like this. I don't know if this is a... So there's an acrylic pen you could use. But sometimes I find, you got to give it a little push. I could use something like that and go around my line. So some people feel a little more confident with that, but for the sake of instruction, I will show you mostly with my paintbrush, just so you learn the technique of the paintbrush. But acrylic pens are a great way to get those lines really consistent. If you're someone who's a little bit shaky, it might help. This is another time, like if I were to be painting up on a canvas, an easel, then you might want to take it to a flat surface, give your hand something steady, like, support your hand, especially if you're working on an easel. You might want to, give yourself, artists often will have something they can rest their hand on. And that twisting motion is going to help make sure that you don't have too much paint on your brush. So you're basically just putting the paint on the paper or canvas, whichever one you're working with. And you don't want to push hard, or else you're going to end up getting a really fat line with your detail brush. Now, you don't have to fill in every single connective spot. So if your painting has a gap, and I'm only going over this area because I see little white spots, so I'm just really cleaning up the edges of my wheel well. And I'm rotating my brush every so often. Noticing my black is kind of thinning out, so I'm going to grab a little more. I'm going to rotate it. Go back over that so it's not too thin. So I'm just barely putting any pressure at all. Finishing up those details, squaring that out real nice, because it's kind of a wonky shape. So the lighter you push, the thinner your line. And this just really helps define the truck. And as you play with it, you're going to realize, okay, I prefer to pull, or I prefer to, stroke up. Whatever is within your comfort is what you should do. I'm going to rotate my canvas and try and pull this back. And if I have gaps in my lines like that, that's okay. It just adds to the character of the truck. And I come down. Now if you've got it where your tree is kind of overlapping into your truck bed a little bit here and there, that might be a good place to put broken lines. I'm going to need a little more water. So again, twist so you get that tip that you want. So here I might just gotta be careful, about to dip in. And this is looking kind of gray, so I'm going to go back over it with the black again. And I squirrel all over the place, you guys. So I apologize if you can't keep up with my craziness of here and there and everywhere. My mind does not walk a straight line. I don't know if that's the creative or if it's just ADHD or who knows what. not enough or too much caffeine at any given point. And I'm afraid of dipping my hand on that side, so I'm going to flip it again. And so don't be afraid to rotate your canvas. I've been at parties where guests have added lights. So if you want to do something like that, you can. If you hate it, just paint over it. That looks kind of gloopy. Twist a little better. So sometimes even I'll rotate my brush as I'm painting because I'll probably have to paint on one side. And I don't want to push to get the paint from the other side, but if I rotate it, then I can get it without having to widen my stroke. So now for my door, and it's kind of disappeared, but I can kind of see the shadow just because I've been painting in the directionality. So it's just going to be a line down, a line across, then we're going to have a line across up here, and then we're going to curve this line down and connect it. Put our door back on. And you can put your handle on now if you want. And we've got most of our outlines. If you wanted to add any other additional little, contour lines, you could do that now. Just little spots of contour. It's a little easier to get in some of these spots with, and add that texture, especially as your brush dries out or grays out. You'll get that without the big stroke. So this can, there, it just felt a little too bright, so I'm just going to kind of lightly gray it out. So add a couple curve lines so we know how, there's definite texture in the well of our car. So this is a good brush to add those kind of things with. Looks just a little too clean right there. Give some contour lines. So, and if you wanted to gray out something, if you're like, this spot right here is too black, and you have black on your brush, dip it in the water, and then just make sure you can see. So if I'm thinking this just looks too clean, I'm just going to take it with the black liquidy. When it dries, it's just going to gray out that area a little bit, so it won't quite look so pink right there. So there we go. All right. Now I'm going to rinse. You need to make sure you have real good clean water for this portion because we just got done with the black. And if we're going to move on to our snow, we are going to do a layer of gray first, but you don't want a ton of gray in there. I'm going to cover up my black and my red. I'm done with those. Should have done that earlier. So pulling out my white, I'll eventually get to my black if I need it. I don't know how much is in my brush. So if you had a little bit of black in your brush and you're graying out, I don't think I had enough. So I'm going to just grab a little black, mix a little gray. I want it more white than black. So remember, your black is really going to go a long way in your white. I'm not sure. Make sure you can see. There we go. So I'm not going to need a ton of it, but so I'm just going to start by putting little snow patches wherever I feel like they should be on my truck. And they're gray for now, because snow, if it's been on the road, it is probably a little bit dirty. You can use your detail brush or go back to your round brush for your wheel wells here. Whichever one you want to use is fine. Grab a little bit more this back end. I'm going to put a little snow on the back wheel wells. Imagine, you know, how does the snow, it throws up, so it's going to be here. We're just dabbing it on. We're not painting at this point. Don't be afraid to wake that up a bit with your water if it's too thin. But just remember it's going to dry thinner, so you know, there might be some gray here. Maybe it's got in the corner up here of the truck. And I'm going to give myself an outline of my circle and just fill that in. I might pull out my metallic silver paint for the wheel well and see how I like that. You can tell where I used the outline with the acrylic marker, because this right here is shiny, and now I'm kind of liking that. Now I'm like, maybe I want to go back and do it all shiny. I kind of like that. I like to have the different textures in my truck, because some parts of our truck are going to be more shiny than others, and it just gives you a variety, which gives you more interest in your art. Let's make sure that's good and right. I wonder if I should bring it down. While we're doing these detail things. Is that too bright? I want you guys to be able to see it. There we go. I think that helps. So I'm dipping back and forth between my gray and my white, the little gray I mixed in my lid, and just continuing to dab, going off the truck a little bit here and there, because it's not going to sit flat on the truck. Put my other side with my wheel well. So this little red truck is so popular right now that these would be great gifts. You could paint these over and over and impress your family and your friends. That kind of went out of control, but sometimes the snow does that. Now, one area I don't want to forget about is, sorry, I'm trying to fix what I'm not loving there. So Sometimes that just happens. You're like, whatever. Put some up on top of this real well. Don't forget the little floor spot where we've got a glop of paint in there. Down here where the tires are, we want to make sure we get some dirty snow down there. And have it kind of fade out. And this I actually tend to do all over the place. I mean, I really just kind of think, oh yeah, I need to do this, or oh yeah, I need to do that. Sometimes I just end up mixing the paint right on my canvas because I didn't blend it well enough, or I just grabbed it and I double loaded. So, little path where a truck has been. A little bit of white in there. I've still got the dirty on my brush, so it's not going to be bright white. We aren't going to probably have bright white snow on the ground where the truck is mucking through. The tree farm. So I'm going to go in and get a little more water on my brush. Give this another layer. That metallic is not going to be solid. Pretty sure of that. So I'm going to put down my base circle first. And again, if you're not comfortable freehanding these in, you don't have to paint over your original one. You could leave it blank and then paint it in gray. Or you can find something small and circular and paint it in, or don't worry about it if it's a little wonky. Just proves you painted it and you're growing. It's all fine. So, I'm just gonna figure out where else we're gonna have snow on this truck. I think it's probably pretty good. I just want to make sure. Got a good base. So I'm gonna go in and add a little more white. I'm not cleaning off my brush. Notice all of my colors are on the edge, so I have lots of white left over. Just gonna add snow. Rotate your brush so you can get those spots. You can throw it down here if you want. You can give your wheel a little movement. You can use your finger to smooth that out if your brush wasn't extremely dry and you don't want it bright white. Or just wipe it off and then dry brush it on. Real light. Give the illusion that you're moving, cruising. You could do that with the metallic silver as well. I think the hardest part of this is just keeping that good circular motion. So you end up looking like it's a circle and not a weird line. There we go. So. Alright. I still need to fix this spot up here. I'm going to throw this brush in the water and try and fix my thumbprint. Whoops. Over here. So I'm going to get a little bit of white, a little bit of black. hope I can just make that look like it goes back in. I'm painting this at school right now and I can hear the kids outside playing. Michigan, that is probably, we don't go outside for recess unless it's 32 and above, so they are limited on their outdoor play because our teachers stand out there with them the whole time. So don't want them out in the freezing cold. Alright, so I think I fixed that pretty well. I don't know if you can see that at all with the glare. That's one thing I'm learning about this document camera. There we go. Not too shabby. Okay. So we've got our truck, we've got our tree. If you wanted to add more snow to the tree, you know, you could stipple it on as much or as little as you want. I've got just a teeny tiny little ever so small amount on the tip of my brush, and I'm just flocking it on the tree just a little bit. Now if you want more, you can do more. Don't be afraid to, you know, make it your own. I kind of want to see that metallic shine through, but you know, obviously, if it's been sitting out in a yard, well, now we got a little bit heavier pressure, so I'm going to pull some of that and put it over here. Pull it up here. I'm using that little brush texture to my benefit. It's got that little feathery look on the edge. There we go. So not too much, but enough that we know we just pulled this tree off the lot. One more small spot right here. Good balance. Okay, so I got tree with some snow. I feel like I just need one more spot over here. See, I could just keep going. Alright, now I'm going to use, while my brush is here, I'm going to dry brush some texture onto my window. And this is just going to give that shadowy illusion. Not a whole lot. You could do the same. Gotta be careful of that thumb down there. Doing the same thing all over. You could do the dry brush down here if you prefer. You know, on your wheels, if you wanted to gray them out a little bit. You could even, you know, throw some on your truck if you wanted to, you know, maybe there's salt. Maybe it's just, you know, just different textures. You know, the lightness and the darkness of everything. Just remember to keep your brush flowing with that direction. So anything curved, you want to keep that curved line. So the door's straight, I'm going to do a straight line. Up here it's curved, so I want that illusion that it's curving down. So you can see how the white adds another layer of dimension. Alright, cleaned off my brush, and now I'm going to pull out my metallic silver. Maybe. I think I've lost it. Oh no, it's in with my red, now that I remember. I just figured I would save myself a cup. So I'm going to see what happens here. Add that metallic. right within the wheel well. No, this is the wheel well. What is this? A hubcap. And you can go in and add as much, you know, if you wanted to shine out, if you wanted to make your, you can make this silver if you wanted, if you had it. You know, at that point, you're just taking your creative liberties to another level. And even though I put my red and silver in the same cup, I haven't held it sideways or anything, so it's fine. They're just sitting there. They might blend together a little bit, but I'm using such a minute amount that it doesn't matter. If I wanted the shimmer on my wheel, I can dry brush it on there just ever so slightly. Another layer. If you wanted shiny snow, you could shimmer it out there. Maybe just add a little sparkle in our snow, so it's not quite so flat. Notice I'm going to dab off the extra. So I don't really want to cover up that white. I just want to maybe add a little shimmer. Put some shimmer on the ground. You could see what happens if we dry brush some of the shine in there. It just depends on, you know, how much shine you want in yours if you're going with the metallic. So I want to dry brush, so I'm going to wipe off the excess. The silver, I keep painting where you can't see because I moved my camera. Sorry about that. So I'm not trying to get a lot on here, and if I put too much at any point, I can either water it out. I've got my water, and see what happens there. Spread it out a bit more. Or you could add it to white if you need to lighten it up again. So lots of different ways you can experiment and see. You know, if I wanted to even dry brush a little bit on this window, I like that silvery. Door handle. So we could just go all day long. Alright, so I might put another layer here, but I kind of like the way that, let's see, super. So this is where we're at so far. We've got our little red truck. If you don't add all the metallic, it's not going to be quite so shiny unless you have a high gloss paint. I got a little out of control over here. So I'm going to rinse off my brush. And if you wanted to add the details in your wheel spokes, you could take your detail brush with a dot of black and give yourself the little lug nuts. I don't know what these are called. I'm just assuming they're lug nuts. You could do something like that. You could paint in a center. You can fill it in. I was at one party where one of the ladies, she actually painted in a circle and then she did the spokes. It was really cool. I tried it on another piece of paper and I was not thrilled with it, so I was glad I did not try it on my painting. So I always tell my students, either, you know, imagine it with your brush before you put it to your canvas, or try it elsewhere. Get out your sketchbook and practice in there. My sketchbook is such a mess, but it's my progress and my growth. Your sketchbook is not supposed to be a perfect place for art. That's kind of wonky right there. Don't know if I'm going to be able to fix that. There we go. Good enough. Maybe make them a little bigger. I don't know. So that is our little red truck. You are welcome to expand on your painting, add to it, subtract from it, do whatever you want. Make it your own. And don't forget to sign your artwork so that everybody can know what an amazing job you did. And it doesn't have to always be, I like just to pick this spot, but some people, sign it within their artwork. They want it kind of hidden, kind of there. You could have a signature, something. If you have an acrylic pen, make sure that before you begin to paint, that it is moving. You don't want to end up trying to get it to wake up on your canvas. So, sometimes I will put a little heart somewhere on my artwork just because I always put it on the eye of my name, but sometimes I'll throw it elsewhere. I think he's cute on the truck, but I typically will sign my name in the bottom right-hand corner unless I feel like it takes away from the artwork itself, and then I hide it somewhere within. And that's me. So, all right, well, I hope you enjoyed this class painting our little red truck, and I hope that you learned some stuff and that you would join us again. If you'd like to do the gnome class or one of our future ones, feel free to send me a message or, just request to join the class. And I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks so much. Have a great day. I forgot to paint in the wreath on my truck. So I'm going to do that now so that you guys are not without a wreath if you want one. You don't have to put one on if you don't want it. But I'm again going to use my detail brush, or depending, let's see, I'm going to start actually with my round brush. So had it in the water, make sure it's not too wet. And just like with my Christmas tree, I'm going to start with my green, and I'm just going to dab around a circle right around that door. Put this up on an angle so you can see it. And once I get a decent sized circle, whatever size you want it to be, then you can so I'm going to add a little metallic, just like I did with my tree, because I really like that shimmer going on. If you don't have the metallic, just pull out your white. And I'm going to grab a little bit of white so we can have different values in our wreath. And again, it's all about the layers. So I've got one layer going on. If you want your wreath to look snowy and have more white, you can add more depth by adding another layer of dark in there. And just keep playing with it until you like what it's doing. I just keep dipping in the different colors. Sometimes you don't know what's going to happen until you are deep into it. You can even double load your brush. I put both the dark green and the metallic, and that's often a good way to get different values on there. And if you get it good and gloopy, I know my real professional words here, and you can end up with a little bit of texture. Now I'm going to let this dry before I paint on any type of red bows or anything. So, and if you have a lot of paint on here, you might end up waiting, a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush now, and I'll be back with my detail brush. Okay, so my wreath is dry. I am going to paint on a little red bow. This is totally optional. You don't have to if you don't want to. But I'm just going to use my detail brush. Again, make sure that you twist so you don't have all sorts of gloppy paint on there. And I'm just gonna do a little bow. Remember, red is pretty translucent, so it may not show up. I'm gonna add that metallic, see if that'll help. If you put a little white in there even, let's see. Adding white to a color often will help take away some of the translucent effects of it. So if I paint that bow in white first, it might show up better. You can always make your bow a different color too. Putting that white bow on there first. You get your little knot. And now I'm just getting that base. And I'm going to add some shadowing. You could always add little red berries. Your tree, lights on your tree. Prefer that over snow. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit of my black. One thing I'm going to suggest to you, I didn't mention this earlier, the top of your lid, when you're all done painting, I'm going to move my painting out of the way. When you're done, I would suggest taking a spritz bottle, just a spray bottle, and spraying a little bit of water on your lid before you put it away, so it'll just retain a little bit of moisture and they don't dry out. So I've done that with all of my paints before I put them away finally. So pull my black out again. So I got my drips on there. Don't want to drip any water onto my work. So I'm just going to go to the edge. A little bit of black is going to go way farther than I want it to. So I'm just going to shadow out some of this. Just where you think the shadows would be. Actually, it's going to be on the bottom, under here. Bring that back up. And if you give yourself black detail lines, I keep going to my metallic. I think I like the red better. I don't know why I put that one away. I'm never done what I think I am. This one might end up a pink though. It'll show up a little better. Notice if I don't like the way it's coming out, I just go over it again. You can always double load your brush. Make sure you've got a real good, fine tip on your detail, just to put in the little itty bitty outlines. A little water might help here to help it flow. And this can get kind of muddy if you don't have the brush real thin. So I'm not rubbing my brush. So if you get to the point where you're like, you don't like your bow at all, because sometimes that happens, it's more like a pretzel, and that's okay. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Just using my brush and wiping off some of that paint. Adding a little more red. Maybe I'll make it a leafy bow. Maybe that'll help. Have a leaf instead of having it be that kind of bow. I dip it in my black, and I dip it in my red. Let's see what happens. Sometimes I just experiment. I'm going to try and keep that knot in a circular motion. So I'm probably going to go back with my acrylic pen once that's dry and really clean that up, because I'm not mad at it, but I do want to see the definition a little bit more. So I'm not getting it with my detail brush. I'm going to try it with the acrylic pen. I've got a couple different kinds of Sharpie ones. So this one has a finer tip, so it might work better. But sometimes this one I got from Michael's, it can tend to, I have to push a little bit harder. So I'm going to make sure I push to wake it up. You can see that in the bottom screen. I want to make sure it'll write. I don't want to have to put too much pressure. Move this so you can see what I'm doing. So you kind of got to wake it up by pushing, and then make sure the paint is going to flow out. Notice you got to kind of go back. So I try and fill it up. I hope this is dry enough. I'm just going to kind of give a couple edges. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Just where the shadows would be. So pretty much the bottom parts of the bow. See, I should have waited a little longer because it's pulling away some of my paint. I'm going to keep loading that up. My goal is to get some definition between the door and, I lost my leg. Oh, but so let's see which one I like better, the Sharpie. This one's not as fine of a tip, but working on too wet of paint. Dabbing. Maybe I need to be wetter. Sometimes being patient is not. If you're working on a larger truck, that might be easier. I want to make sure I get all the white and red, all the color off. I might come touch that up when it dries, but where's my brush? See, we could just go all day. Alright, so there you have it. Now we have a truck with our bow and wreath, and you can leave it off if you don't love it, or practice it in your sketchbook. And there it is, guys. Alright, goodbye for real. Have a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you next time.